You know, ever since I arrived in New York, there's been so much controversy about my poems, whether they're serious or humorous, that I thought I would tell you folks how I go about writing a poem. And the title of this essay is called How to Write a Poem by Henry Gibson. First of all, and probably most important, is to pick a subject for your poem. Now, most subject pickers go about this by making lists of what they see out the window. Of course, if you're just starting out in the poem business, you might as well take the easy way and consult your favorite dictionary, preferably one of those big unabridged types like you always bump into when you enter the library. Next, close your eyes and stick your finger between two pages. Be careful not to peep, because if you do, the poem won't turn out. Then, open the book and jot down the word that is nearest your finger. Third, close your eyes again, just like you did in step number 1. Fourth, close the dictionary, remembering to pull out your hand before you do. Fifth, relax for a minute and figure out how the two words are related. For example, if the first word is feather and the second is policeman, you gotta take time and figure out what they've got in common. Then, write down your reasons in simple sentences, making sure that they do not rhyme. Nowadays, almost anybody can write a poem that has rhyme or rhythm. Of course, honest-to-goodness poem writing's like catching a skunk. You make up your own rules. Then, state your conclusion and dream up a title to put at the top. That's how to write a poem. Yes, that's how to write a poem. Except for one last thing. Be sure that first, you learn how to write. This simple little song poem was inspired by something we do back home most every Saturday night, which, as you may have heard, is alligator counting. I should say that it's just a little less brutal than frog gigging, but the principle is the same. Now, I don't know if you folks have ever counted alligators before, but in case you haven't, here's how you do it. First of all, you go out and you get yourself a flashlight. Then, you go down to the river and you find yourself a rowboat. Then, you put the flashlight inside and you get inside. And you row, and you row, right out into the middle of the river. And then you make sure everything's still and quiet, and you pick up the oars and put them into the boat. And you turn the flashlight on, and you shine it up and down and all around. And pretty soon, when the alligator sees the light, he comes out, and you count him. Well, anyway, that's what inspired this next number. And it's called The Alligator by Henry Gibson. The alligator is my pal. He could be your pal too. He will if you'll just understand that he's got feelings too. He loves to play and swim about. He never sings the blues. You'd like him better as a friend than wearing him as shoes. Alligator, 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 he could be your friend too. Most people think that the alligator is a good-for-nothing critter, but I think that he is our friend. Well, look how he gives his skin to make the shoes and make the bags. In addition, there are the belts. But most of all, It is the fun in his eyes when I count him on Saturday night. He don't mean no harm. All he needs is affection and the care of a loving dentist. Ask not what the alligator can do for you, but rather what you can do for the alligator. The alligator is my pal. He could be your pal too. He will if you'll just understand that he's got feelings too. He loves to play and swim about. He never sings the blues. You'd like him better as a friend than wearing him as shoes. Alligator, alligator, alligator. He could be your friend, could be your friend, could be. If you can love an alligator, you can love anybody. He could be your friend too. I guess it may seem strange to you to come here to a place like this and find someone like me reciting poetry. But back home, it got to be a habit that after dinner, before dessert, I would recite while the folks ate. Not only did it make people laugh, but it also helped speed up the dishwashing. The idea for this next poem came to me when I was clipping my toenails one night, just after I'd had my bath. Why I Like Soap. By Henry Gibson. I like soap because it is lots of fun to be with. Well, take, for example, the bathtub, which is a lonely enough place. In addition, it can float and be carved into a bubble. But most of all, it is clean. There's a little bit of dirt in each of us. The poem I have chosen next is dedicated to a friend of mine on one of the big New York newspapers, who liked my poems so much that he wanted to syndicate and publish them. Unfortunately, at one of those big board meetings, it was decided by some of the editors that they were a little over the heads of the people in Sioux City. Now, isn't that the silliest thing? I'm going to make this a double dedication to Ben and the people in Sioux City. The Newspaper by Henry Gibson. The newspaper is my friend because it tells me so many secrets. Take, for example, the information about how to cure mumps by drinking goat's milk. In addition, it can be used for making hats or drying bacon. Oftentimes, there is that weather map and the recipe which makes us all laugh. But most of all, it is the headlines and the stories underneath. Basically, we are all newsy. And now for a real change of pace. I don't know if you folks have ever watched Southern television before, but whatever your feelings may be towards commercials, back home I gotta admit that they really are different. The following is my impression of a typical Southern commercial. How to Skin a Polecat by Henry Gibson. First of all, and probably most important, is to get yourself a polecat. Then, take the little fella and hold him nice and gentle by the throat. Deposit a knife deep inside the inner of his round little belly. Make a horizontal, quick as you can, and push it back and forth until you reach the other side. Then, kinda quick, pull his insides out. Put all but the liver into a nice little bowl placed conveniently on the kitchen table. You want to save the liver for making mugwump patties. Well, almost everybody nowadays use polecat liver for making mugwump patties. Of course, the honest-to-goodness mugwump patties are made with wump. Then, peel off the skin, just like you do with an orange, and save the bones for later. Then, rinse it off and dry it in the oven. Well, that's how to skin a polecat. Yes, that's how to skin a polecat. It is a sad but true fact that the people who work the hardest are often the ones who are most neglected. In order, in some small way, to alleviate this condition, I have written the following musical poem. How Now, Calpurnia, by Henry Gibson. My cow, Calpurnia, she's the prettiest little cow you ever seen. She has spots of brown and yellow and white. She even has spots of green right on her tooth here. My cow, Calpurnia, every morning she would wait in her stall. As she flicked her tail, I would fill my pail. Oh, she really did give her all. So give like Calpurnia, give all you've got inside. Give all you can to others, and your heart'll be big and wide. In contrast to the preceding work, I would now like to recite a poem which was first done in public at our last annual 4-H chicken fry. It is simply entitled, The Feather, by Henry Gibson. The feather is a wonderful thing. Without it, the bird could not fly. In addition, it warms the old warblers and protects them when they are hiding. The police like the feather too, because it helps them control the traffic. Well, take, for example, the streets, which would be a mess if birds started walking. But most of all, it is cheerful and gay. If it were not for the feather, we would be without fluff. Though it doesn't happen too often, once in a while since I've been here, I get feeling just a bit homesick. I guess last Wednesday was the worst of all. As you see, it was on that day, 3 years ago, that a very close and a very dear friend of mine passed away unexpectedly. This next selection is a musical poem which was written in his loving memory. I call it, Here Today, Gone Tomorrow, by Henry Gibson. Once I had a mule and I called him Sylvester. Found him on a Sunday down on Seven Oaks Road. He wasn't much to look at, he just looked like Sylvester. Still he was strong and could carry my load. Then one day he died. Yes, then one day he died. He'd been standing by a tree just a munchin' clover when he rolled his little eyes and he plunked right over. Found an empty field for to bury Sylvester. Dug myself a hole, then I said a little prayer. Filled the hole with flowers, then I filled it with Sylvester. Covered it with dirt, then I left Sylvester there. Left Sylvester there. I left Sylvester there, though he's lying in his grave, oh so cold and skinny. In my dreams I hear his bray and his lonely whinny. Never comes a day I don't think of Sylvester. Never comes a Sunday I don't think of that road. You can bring back a memory, but you can't bring back Sylvester. He is gone now for good, and I'm carrying his load. As you know, I'm from just a little outside of Mobile, Alabama, a town called Fairhope, which has a population of about 3,000 or 4,000. It fluctuates yearly. This year I left, and the population has gone progressively down. It seems that everybody that's ever worked in a drugstore has begun to write poems. You can't get many good sodas in Alabama now, but you can certainly get a lot of bad words. Well, it seemed that I'd been writing poems ever since I was a little kid. And I have a cousin who's in the theater, and from him I guess I caught the bug because I started reciting my poems outside the theater, which I'll tell you about a little later. One thing led to another, and before you know it, I got to New York and was introduced to a man named Mike Wallace. Well, Mike Wallace kind of asked his staff, "What does this Henry Gibson do?" And my cousin said, "I can't describe it. You got to see him." So he did. And they put me on his show. And I was surprised because the reaction was good and I had been invited back pretty soon. And the next thing you know, I was invited to sing for the New York Philharmonic. Well, that was the surprise of my life. There was Mr. Leonard Bernstein and the man from The Tonight Show, Skitch Henderson, and just all these people in fancy Edwardian clothes, you know. It was a big ball that they had there. So I felt just a little out of place, but I sang for them, and they liked it. And then after that, I went on to The Tonight Show. And the next morning, my mother phoned me on the telephone because she couldn't see the Mike Wallace show. And she said, "Henry, when you told me you were going to be on television, I was sure you were just a bit touched in your head." She said, "But last night when I saw you on there, I couldn't believe my eyes." She said, "Wouldn't you know that Mr. Nixon would have his 7th crisis in the middle of one of your poems?" You see, what happened was, just halfway through a poem, it came on with a big flash with the results of the elections in California, and so that stopped the poem. I didn't know it. I kept talking, as I always do. And then after that, I went on with Jerry Lewis. Well, probably the most exciting thing that happened was last week with Jerry Lewis. We got a telegram from Atlantic City, and it said, "Could we have Henry down here in Atlantic City to read his poems at our nightclub?" And the name of the nightclub was Luigi's Gondola Room. Well, that was a strange experience, but I did it. And 14 hours after leaving New York, I opened there for the first of 3 shows in one night, and I was scared to death. But I finally got through that night, and by the end of the week, things were working pretty well. But I found out one thing. You had to bring in kind of local humor in a nightclub. So after days of struggling, I thought, well, I'll cook myself up some good local jokes. And you're about to hear the 3 worst jokes I ever cooked up in my life. The first thing I thought of was saying, "You know, I was just walking down the boardwalk this afternoon. Never have I seen so many bikinis. We got the same thing back home, except we call them bandanas. The men wear them around the neck, and the women wear..." Well, they didn't go for that joke there either. So I thought, maybe I better get even a little more local and talk about the restaurant, you see. Luigi's, and they had a singer there, and everything was Italian, the food, so I thought I'd go into that. And I said, gee whiz, the first night I got here, they went out of their way to serve me good Southern food. You know, the first night I arrived, I had zucchini and black-eyed peas. And then just last night, between shows, well, they served me chitlins alla Romano. But the best of all was when the waiter came up to me tonight and gave me a real surprise. It was Hush Puppy's cacciatore. You know, we in Alabama have never heard too much about Atlantic City, but we know a little bit about Philadelphia, and we're very indebted to it for such beautiful national monuments as Grace Kelly and cream cheese. And we've also heard about the great educational strides which have taken place there. It's not so much that we're impressed by the fact that in Philadelphia nearly everybody reads the bulletin, as much as we're impressed by the fact that in Philadelphia nearly everybody reads. And now for those of you who like green things, here's a little how to do it for gardeners. If you will pay close attention, I'm sure that you will notice a structural similarity between this and my poem about the polecat, which you all enjoyed so much. How to Take Care of the Plum Tree by Henry Gibson. First of all, and probably most important, is to get yourself a plum tree. Then dig a hole and place the little sapling inside it. Go and purchase some bug juice in one of those cans with the handy sprays. Nowadays, almost every store carries 2 or 3 kinds of bug juice. Of course, honest-to-goodness bug juice is only carried by bugs. Then spray it about till the little critters know that they're licked. And leave the tree alone till the old produce starts to grow. Next, space the plums until they are 4 or 5 inches apart. Mulch the baby roots by scattering wood chips at the trunk base. Then turn on the hose and let the young ones wet their whistle. That's how to care for the plum tree. Yes, that's how to care for the plum tree. Except for one last thing, be sure that your friends like plums. While I have been writing poems since I was just a little tad, it was not really until 3 months ago that anybody took serious notice. What happened was, I went on a trip to visit my cousin, who is an actor. He was appearing in North Carolina in a musical there called The Boyfriend. And since I had never seen him on a stage, I decided to go up and take a look. Well, it was such an exciting thing that I asked the producer of the theater if I could be in the show. And he said, no, I couldn't be in the show. He thought my voice was too funny. So then I said, you know that garden out front where the people sit and have drinks? Well, do you think it'd be all right if I just went around the tables and recited and sang my poems? And he said, sure. So I did. And the people started paying me. Well, the following little stanza was composed right there in that garden at the request of a woman named Mrs. Peterson, who offered me a $5 bill if I'd write her something about happiness. Happiness can be yours for little or no money by Henry Gibson. The sun shine bright, don't it? Cows and horses eat grass. Everybody has his good points. It's just an awful lot of fun shaking hands and saying howdy. And then yellow and green. But the most fun of all is living and being happy. And that's why I say that happiness can be yours for little or no money. Just 2 weeks after writing Happiness, my cousin's show closed in Pinehurst. I was all set to go back to Fairhope when Jimmy turned to me and said, "You want to know something, Henry? For all the time I've been here, you've made more money than me. You better come back to New York." Well, I did, and let me tell you, it was like walking into a different world. The first couple of days I was here, I just drank in the sights, studied the faces, heard the hum of the traffic, and smiled at the sunrise. The following short selections are based on some of my earliest reflections of the world I found in New York. Broadway by Henry Gibson. Behind all those lights, there must be people. Behind all those signs are people too. Behind every door are other people, and each one of them could use another friend. I Fell Down the Subway by Henry Gibson. There was blood on my head and my nose, and I was sitting in a dirty puddle. For a second, I hated New York. All those crowded streets and the subway stairs. Then I felt a hand at my elbow and heard a voice, just like my father's. Then, though my head was pounding and my suit was wet, I started to laugh. I hadn't got hurt so bad. I had just made another friend. Much as people poke fun at togetherness, we live in a lonely world. Here is a little song about the need for attention and understanding. It has always been a favorite of my mother's. The Coyote by Henry Gibson. Did you ever stop to figure why the coyote howls at night? It's because he's by himself and without a friend in sight. He's feeling mighty lonely, and I know that you would too, sitting out on the prairie with nothing else to do. Most people figure that the coyote is the way he is because it's by his own choosing. But if he had his way, he'd be hanging around the ranch house just like dogs. And he used to, too. Except one day, he got into trouble for eating the wrong thing. He thought the little children playing in the garden were turnips. And ever since that day, he has been persecuted by man. Just another example of man's inhumanity to animal. He don't mean no harm. All he needs is a little love and understanding. There are no bad coyotes. Occasionally, I am asked if I can write functional poems as well as artistic ones. Here are just such a pair, which I have recited at many functions. A Birthday by Henry Gibson. A birthday is a special thing, like the sunset after rain. It makes you warm inside. For a single special moment, hundreds of bright balloons and the sounds of other voices crowd the memory and seem to live. Then you blow out the candles, and like a sneeze, the moment fades. All that remains is the icing. The Wedding by Henry Gibson. The wedding is my favorite thing. It joins the two together. In addition, there are the flowers and the music that they play. Oftentimes, there is the grandmother riding on a scooter. The drinks are pleasant too, But most of all, it is the couple who wear the golden rings. It is them that I like the most, and I think they like us, too. Education is Important by Henry Gibson. The book is friend to us all. Without all our words, we could not write. Now, reading is another example. The more you think, the less you talk. But most of all, spelling and counting. Aren't teachers people too? If you have ever been to Philadelphia, then you know about brotherly love and cream cheese. Just a few weeks ago, I was invited to address the Optimist Club in the historic section of Germantown. The following is one of my contest entries, which I considered appropriate to recite in our first capital. It was inspired by a painting in one of my history books of the historic Independence Hall. What freedom means to me in 25 words or less. By Henry Gibson. It means freedom from speech, our Liberty Bell, and Betsy Ross, free schooling for the little children, and you can own your own dog, and Why I Like Poetry by Henry Gibson. I like poetry because it is very useful in making new friends. Well, take, for example, the Coyote, who was downright hostile to me before I wrote him a poem. In addition, it can relax you and provides an escape from such daily chores as chopping the wood or skinning a polecat. Oftentimes, poetry writing can be materially rewarding too, like when you enter one in some contest and win a lifetime supply of succotash. But most of all, it helps us to chuckle, and goodness knows, with the condition the world's in, the only way to survive is by laughing. And that's it. Thank you.